So, in this International Congress, we're going to begin with this first block on rehabilitation and urban rehabilitation and renewal. In recent years, the way of addressing problems of environmental sustainability and social and economic sustainability in cities have been through different rehabilitation and renewal projects in the urban fabric. The presentations that we've given in this block will focus on providing more in-depth information based on analysis of contemporary processes. They will also talk about different interventions and projects undertaken by public administrations, from promotion and financing. And they will talk to us about experiences in rehabilitation, maintenance and sustainable projects in heritage, which forms part of protected urban centres, without ignoring, of course, social adaptation of urban spaces to climate change. Of special relevance will be actions which will aim to achieving the SDG goals of the United Nations, aimed at developing safe, resilient, sustainable cities, committed to guaranteeing access for citizens to the basic necessary services which are safe and accessible, as well as the improvement of neighbourhoods, reducing the negative environmental impact caused by cities. We will begin with a block which will be structured around guest speakers, scientific presentations, ending with a Q&A session and dialogue on best practices and a round table. We will begin with the guest speakers. The first speaker is Vasco Peixoto de Freitas. He is a head teacher on construction at the Faculty of Engineering at Oporto University. He is the author and co-author of approximately 400 publications, scientific publications. More than 10 books of his have been published, and he's also the coordinator and author of more than 1,000 projects and studies on comfort, energy efficiency and buildings. He's the member of different institutions of great relevance and importance in this field. He has an extensive CV, and all I've done is just touched upon a very extensive CV, which is equally brilliant. Vasco, it's a great pleasure to welcome you this morning here. God, I was thinking of the evening already. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here this morning. Welcome. And the title of his presentation, it's over here somewhere, is as follows: Energy Efficiency and Comfort in Social Housing, the Best Strategy Against Energy Poverty. A round of applause for Vasco, please.
Buenos días, muitas gracias por la invitación. Es un honor, un privilegio participar en esta importante conferencia. Não hablo perfeitamente o espanhol, vou fazer minha conferência em inglês. The topic of my talk today is the energy efficiency and the comfort in social housing. I think efficiency energy is one point, comfort is another different point. My presentation is divided in 6 points. First, the social housing in Portugal. Second, the problem of the efficiency and the comfort in social housing. The importance of the measurement of the energy consumption in social housing, because the theory and the practice gives different numbers. The problem of the energy poverty and the consequence in the health and the mortality. The traditional financing programs that we have in our government, and a new approach for financing renovation wave, taking account the minimization of the discomfort inside social housing. And finally, a short conclusion. In Portugal, we have about 2% of the dwellings called social housing, only 2%. I think most of the social housing have some degradation problems, and until 2050 it is necessary to improve the energy performance of these buildings. In Porto Town we have 13,000 dwellings that we need to rebuild, and the strategy is very important. The energy conservation is solved now. we increase the thermal performance of the walls, we increase the thermal performance of the windows, we take in account for summertime the solar protection, we implement a lot of time exterior shading, that is crucial for the comfort in summertime. I think this problem is solved. But the ventilation is not solved. We need smart ventilation systems. We need a ventilation with different rates in summertime and wintertime, during the night and during the day. We need to improve the quality of our systems of ventilation. This is not completely solved. But our idea is to create best condition for people with low income to live with quality in the center of the town. But we have a big challenge to create near zero energy buildings. And to have zero energy buildings, we need to implement renewable energies, solar panels, PVC panels, biomass or heat pumps. And it is important to know very well the way that the families use the building and the way that the families use this type of equipment. So it is crucial to understand the difference between energy efficiency and comfort inside dwellings, because sometimes the poor families don't have comfort. The goal is to minimize the discomfort inside these houses. And the strategy for the envelope and the strategies for the systems implemented, it's very, very important. It is crucial to take into account our specificity, our specific climate. It's different in Granada, in Porto, or in Oslo. It is important to take into account the economical situation of the families and the cultural aspects. In Europe, everything is different. In the center and the north of Europe, we need to eating every time, but in the south of Europe is different. If we increase a lot the performance in winter time, sometimes in summertime we have a lot of discomfort. This equilibrium between summer and winter, it's very important, especially in social housing, because the families most of times don't have enough money to pay the energy, to pay the bill for the comfort. All European countries use the same model. Our idea is to have a good level of energy certification, and the goal is until 2050 all buildings goes to near zero energy building. This is the goal, of course, this is the correct goal. But we have a problem. If we compare the real consumption of social housing and if you compare with the theoretical consumption, we can observe a big difference. A lot of studies show clearly this difference. In social housing, we need to take into account this situation. This is a problem. The problem is we find a difference between theoretical energy consumption according to our model and the real energy consumption, especially in southern European countries. And this point, it's very, very important for the decision. Another question is, does energy certification translate energy consumption and CO2 production in social housing? And the answer is no, don't translate. And it is necessary, the second question, why don't translate? Is clear in our country. In average, in Europe, most of the countries spend more 60% of the energy for space heating. It is not our case in Portugal. We spend less 20% of the energy for heating. And in social housing, it is low, the money put in heating. This situation, it's very important to take in account. Of course, it's different if you compare Portugal or Belgium or Austria or Finland. Another point is, what is the best strategy? Is the energy efficiency in social housing or minimizing discomfort? In my point of view, in our point of view, is minimizing the discomfort, especially because the families spend a small quantity of money per year for eating. So the most important thing is to rebuild the buildings, take into account the comfort or try to minimize the discomfort inside. So it is, in my point of view, in our point of view, very, very important to measure the energy consumption in social housing. Nowadays, we have commercial monitoring systems. We can measure energy for cooking, energy for light, energy for heating. It's not very complex. We can use smart power plugs, or we can use sensor connected with the switchboard. We can receive in our PC, or we can receive in our smartphone the information. And some months the families don't spend energy for heating, don't spend energy for cooling in social housing. So the energy used in heating or cooling, it's very important for the strategy. It is important to know the good place to put the money in the rehabilitation, and it is not interesting to put money in components or systems that are not very good for the comfort. To finish this part, in my country, in Portugal, heating and cooling don't have the same importance that in the other countries, in the center and in the north of Europe, and especially in social housing, the energy spending for heating and cooling is very, very, very low. So we need to make a reflection about the energy poverty and the consequence in the health and in the mortality in the families that live in social housing. This family have a low income. For these families, the price of the energy is higher. The government sometimes gives some money for the poor families, but is not enough to heating and cooling your house during all year, during all time. So we try to establish a correlation between the average monthly temperature and the mortality. For example, for Azores Island in the middle of the Atlantic Sea, the temperature is constant along the year. The mortality don't change a lot during the year. But for example, for Porto area, we have some months with average temperature below 15 degrees, the mortality increase. And for example, in Bragança, with a similar climate to Zamora, the mortality increase a lot for these poor families in winter time, and of course a little bit in summertime. So we need to think about temperature inside the house, because with low temperatures in winter we have a lot of problems of molds. Of course the ventilation is crucial to solve these kinds of problems, but the heating is very, very important, and if you have moisture you have degradation of the air quality. So increase the temperature with low cost for the families every month, in our point of view, is the best strategy. We need to take the good decision with the money available in this kind of process. Traditionally, the government put money available to rebuild social housing. The traditional financing model is the following. Have a reduction of the energy consumption. 30%, 50% is not important, depend of the program. In reality, it's not very complex. We propose a program. It is very easy to explain theoretically that we decrease the energy consumption, we decrease the CO2 production, and we have a payback in a short period of time. This is the theory. Because in social housing, this is not the reality. And to have N0 energy buildings, especially in historical city center, it's very complex because the integration of renewable energy is complex. And the renewable energy is a very good strategy, but we need to take into account the durability, the maintenance costs, the management, the efficiency along the time, etc. So we need to think about these kinds of problems. To rebuild is good, but the money is not very high. Sometimes we need to take a decision about the best point to make investment to increase the quality and the comfort. And a lot of economic stake in the payback calculation is doing, because we use the theoretical consumption and the real consumption is not equal to to the theoretical consumption. So in the technical and economical point of view, these programs are correct. But in reality, to receive the money, we used a convenient in truth. It is not true. It's theoretical true, but in the reality, it is not true, these kinds of programs. So to finish my presentation in the 5 minutes, we propose a new approach for financing renovation wave. I think until 2050, we have a big challenge in all European countries to rebuild dwellings, especially to rebuilding social housing. And to minimize the discomfort for us is the key word for this strategy. Why? Because in social housing we use intermittent heating and of course in some areas intermittent cooling. So the best strategy, if we use intermittent heating and intermittent cooling, this is the practice, needs a different approach that we use normally for a house when the comfort is not discussed. The energy efficiency and the decarbonization is the two keywords for the next feature. In our approach, we need to make a calculation of a passive discomfort index. What is a passive discomfort index? We have acceptable comfort in wintertime, is this horizontal line. We have acceptable discomfort in summertime, and the blue area represents the passive discomfort index in winter, and the orange area represents the passive discomfort index in summertime. And it is good to mix both, because we need to have equilibrium between winter and summer, especially in the southern European countries like Portugal and Spain. If you use heating only 2 hours, we decrease this discomfort. For example, if you're eating 2 hours, we reduce the discomfort. And you can make the calculation of this area. It is not difficult. If you have a tool, we can make the calculation of the temperature each hour along the year, and this calculation is not very, very, very complex. And you can, for example, change one window, or increase the insulation of the roof, or control the ventilation, or create shading devices, or put renewable energy. Everything can be studied with this approach, with the fluctuation of the temperature inside social housing, with intermittent heating and intermittent cooling. To do that is not difficult. Nowadays, we have available tools, thermal tools or hygrothermal tools. It is not very complex. We have the geometry, we have the outdoor climate, we have the composition of the envelope of the building, we have the properties of the different materials, and easily we can make the calculation of the temperature and the discomfort. And you can prepare tables like that to help the decision maker to take the best decision in a specific complex of social housing. The orientation of the house is important, of course. The hours of heating or cooling is important. The performance of the roof is important. The performance of the window is important. The performance of the ventilation is important. And you can calculate the percentage of time with discomfort. Some solution is a red solution, is not so good. Green solution is acceptable solution. And with the same quantity of money, we can, using the building physics approach and the calculation of the temperature, to define the best configuration for our complex of social housing. In my point of view, I finish. Of course, the energy efficiency is very important. The approach B, it's very correct to increase the certification level. It's very good for the decarbonization to have near zero energy buildings, but the calculation of the index of discomfort is crucial for social housing. And this is the best way to choose solution A or B, component A or component B. In conclusion, to finish in my time, in 15 minutes, I said social housing is a different problem. We need to increase the quality of life of people that have low quantity of money to live, and we need to increase the comfort inside. but the designers have a narrow path to define the best strategy for the renovation wave. Of course, we need innovation. We need to take into account the sustainability, but sometimes the research are limited, and we need to take some decision, and without good approach, sometimes the solutions are not the best. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchísimas gracias por su intervención y continuamos en este primer bloque con la siguiente ponencia invitada, Sergio Nassarre Aznar, catedrático de Derecho Civil en la Universidad Rovira y Virgili de Tarragona y director de su cátedra UNESCO de Vivienda, magistrado suplente en la Audiencia Provincial de Tarragona, doctor europeo en Derecho y máster en Economía Inmobiliaria por la Universidad de Cambridge, académico correspondiente de la Real Academia de Jurisprudencia y Legislación. Consultor además en varios organismos internacionales como la Comisión Europea, la FAO o Amnistía Internacional, entre otros. El título de su ponencia, Los retos de la vivienda tras 15 años de crisis. Un honor, Sergio, también que nos acompañe en esta mañana. Muchas gracias.
Sergio.
Sí.
Sí.
Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias. Como me han dicho que solamente somos 2 o 3 juristas en la sala, pues pido delante excusas. Solemos ser muy aburridos porque nosotros pues no ponemos fotos de edificios y tal, pero disfrutamos mucho en los congresos pues, de ingeniería.
We enjoy very much
Que la vivienda, además de estar en los libros, es una cosa
being participants in these conferences. So I would like to congratulate the organizing committee of this conference as well as its direction. In 15 minutes, I'm going to try to share with you the sad story of the housing policies in Spain. When we're talking about sustainability and social housing, it really is important to point out that we haven't done a very good job up until now, especially since the financial crisis of 2007. And things don't look good. We're not doing better, we're doing worse, in fact. So it's very important to contextualize the housing policies, how Spain is doing, how the rest of Europe is doing, and try and draw some conclusions. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is the result of several research projects that we have participated in terms of renting, lack of housing, collaborative housing, etc., many of which you will find on the internet, open source. I will also talk to you about the results of our next project about the European housing studies. We have a poster outside. Here you have the QR. It's the first time the European Union has financed a training project for the real estate professionals. And we include here constructions, companies, politicians, people that work within different registries. And this is the first project aimed at training them all in Europe. And if you are interested, you can gather more information in the QR. When we talk about sustainability, the green side of this diagram, and affordability, we talk about something rather complex. You will find this in one of our reports for the Progressive Studies Foundation in Europe, also open concrete actions for social and affordable housing in the EU. When the politicians have to make choices and they think about affordability and sustainability, they always think about magical formulas like rent control or more social housing or ICO loans and provide young people with the 20% percent of down payment for their mortgage. Here, in this graph, we list the 38 ingredients that we need for affordability in housing and more than 30 that are required for sustainability. It's a very complex topic. Energy and energy efficiency are very, very complex. This is one of the 30-something items. So when we think about the different measures that need to be taken, this is another thing that's added on to the list. And as always, this affects those that have less options. And therefore, they suffer the consequences. However, it is very important to contextualize the situation of Spain with regards to Europe. And I must confess, in these 15 minutes, is that we're not doing as badly as we thought. All of the northern countries within the European Union that have spent so much time fostering renting have more over-indebtedness than Portugal, Spain, Malta and Italy and Eastern Europe countries. They double our over-indebtedness of their citizens. This is Eurostat data and it's available for you all, except Greece, which is a peculiar case. Over-indebtedness in average over-indebtedness in Europe. Spain is just a little bit above the average because of the policies implemented lately, but up until then we were below. If we go to Denmark, Switzerland, Norway, Belgium and Germany, they are all above our numbers. So, of course, we have to carry on working, we have to improve, but we're not as bad as we could be. This is also a similar case for the families that are in the first, in the lower percentages, which are the most humble families. With regards to the different types of tenancies, this is very important because we're talking about social housing for rent and we're talking about social housing that we own. Everything costs and everything has different taxes. The social housing for rent, you can never acquire, and of course it requires people to be subsidized for the rest of their lives that depend on their cities, of their cities. In Vienna, they have this sort of initiative constantly. In Switzerland, we have 6 funds that control 65% of the real estate for rent in Switzerland. So we have 98% of the population in Switzerland owe money to someone, whereas in our case it's only 47%. So a policy of promoting rental rather than ownership has this as a consequence, creating permanently dependent people. In Vienna, 65% of the housing is social. That's great. They have been carrying this out for 100 years, and we have only started doing social housing for rent now. In a conference, they stated that if we started working on social housing now, we would achieve it eventually. Great. In Vienna, they haven't changed their political representatives for a very long time. The political party that has managed or has been in power in Vienna has been the same for the last 100 years, which means that there is an impact on democracy. So if the highest property ownership belongs to the state in a village, this has an impact, and this poses a problem. In Spain, Portugal, Malta, and Italy, how have we managed? We have implemented a housing policy that avoids renting and promotes buying. We have built in Spain 6.8 public housing for acquiring. I'm from Catalonia. The president of Catalonia decided that we were going to expropriate housing. And yet, in any case, since 2011, we haven't built social housing. We present Andalusia as a good example of good territorial cohesion. We are not predators here in Andalusia. You have a very sustainable model for the territorial management or the land management. If we own a house and we multiply it by the people that exist, about 18 to 22 million people own their own house in Spain, half of the population. That is why we have quite a low over-indebtedness rate in Spain. And at the moment, we have 47% of the families that live in their own house, having paid their mortgage already. So we have a rate of properties acquired of 82%. So from 46% of the people have already paid for their housing. We have a margin for improvement. But when we've done worse is in the last 15 years, where we have promoted rent without bearing in mind what has happened in other countries that have carried out this sort of initiative. As is well known, is that we should not focus only in one type of tenancy, but share it along. It's also important to understand that social housing for rent is a cyclical tenancy. It's only possible to do this when there's lots of money. And our inaugural speaker spoke about it, and this was important for the real estate boom. However, these are built at a moment when people don't want to rent because they can afford their own housing. Yet when things get dire is when renting is important. So from 2017, instead of being more imaginative and invent other formulas, what we have done is increase the pressure. We are going to increase the taxes for those that have empty houses. We're going to expropriate. All of these measures have been taken in other countries like France, and the results have been modest. And if we ask any research institutes like Evalúa in Catalonia, the current housing project for Spain actually is bearing all of this in mind. And when they asked research institutions what impact this would have, it means that all of these changes in tax means that we're going to, of course, have more money, but it doesn't have an impact on the situation itself positively. We have published a paper recently where we demonstrated that nobody has asked about the evaluation of housing policies, that they have not got academic base, they haven't got academic weight. Housing when you own it, taboo since 2007. Basically, since then it's been more and more difficult to access to a loan to be able to have your own house. And we have expelled the most vulnerable families from the market, and we have condemned families with the lowest incomes to rent. Because rent in Spain has always been more expensive, and since 2012 it is extremely expensive, because we have driven families that have less income to rent. As you can imagine, we are trying to use the Swiss model. There's a great concentration of real estate that is now controlled by private funds and wealthy families. Because as families can't buy this real estate, then these investment funds buy them. The families that could invest in buying their own house in 2007 now are the tenants of these great investment funds.
No existían prácticamente antes.
When we talk about this situation, we really have to consider the negative effects that it has had. These families can't buy and they can't rent. We're asking them to collaborate and create co-housings and co-living, and all of you live together. It should be something voluntary. It's not something that we should enforce. During the pandemic in Catalonia, they enforced the 2050 law, co-living, and they enforced the construction, or they supported the construction of 20 square meter housing for co-living. 24 square meters. It's all great. It's all fantastic. The renters are super happy, but the truth is that this is not something coherent in terms of standards of living. 24 square meters is a desk, a bed, and little else. The housing for rent is a complete disaster. We have had several laws implemented that we are listing here: the RDL 21/218, the 9/219, the 7/219, and the 11/220. Now, in December 2023, when everything is a complete chaos, we're going to make rental contracts longer, and we're going to cap the rent. And really, this is not something that is coherent. It's really almost expropriation. And now we are going to talk about the Proyecto de Ley de la Vivienda, which is a housing law for 2023 that is under review. The law basically hinders access to housing for those that don't have one. It helps those who are squatters and gets property away from those that actually own them. So when we talk about private property, we really that existed in 2007, it ends up fostering squatting now in 2023. But this is not sustainable, and it's not very imaginative. And here I have listed the different measures. First of all, and I think this is more scandalous than anything else I've said, if those of you who are lawyers and those of you who want to, if you read the Articles 7, 10 and 11 of what is going to be the housing law, it touches upon the expropriation of housing of all Spanish peoples. It's the first time that it is possible for the government to expropriate our houses. And how do we do that? But by extracting it from the civil code, which consecrates private property. With the state's civil competences, what we do is change the tenancy of housing, and the state will now have the ability to decide what we're going to do with our housing or not. Can I use my flats, for instance, to have an English academy? Well, no, the state will now decide what you can and cannot do in your house. And if we live in a house, 4 rooms, and we are only a family of 2, well, won't be good, because the state will decide. So for instance, if we want to leave in our will a house to our son, if our son or our daughter has another house, then they can't have two. So this is worrying, especially pertaining to this conference. The concepts of Article 3 are all wrong. We're not understanding what social housing is in Spain. These concepts are obsolete internationally. We talk about social housing in these situations. So they're pointing me to the timer, so I will draw to a conclusion. The concept that is referred to in the law is not internationally accepted because it's very difficult to understand how much social housing exists in Spain because nobody has counted them, nobody knows how they're managed. So real estate promoters publicly have done a great job, but it's very difficult to understand what the situation. So one of the other things that are rather problematic in this law is the protection of squatters, which is internationally catalogued in a list of people that have no homes, homeless. So really, I believe that this is a very precarious situation. So I leave you with a Chesterton quote: "Giving a vote is not real power, but giving people homes is." So thank you very much. This is our book. You may read it if you wish. Thank you very much.
Sergio, muchísimas gracias por su ponencia, interesantísima. Y perdona si os tengo que cortar o de vez en cuando me veis asomar por ahí, que sepáis que soy un poco más que nada porque tenemos que controlar un poquito los tiempos, ¿vale? Seguimos con la tercera ponencia de esta mañana, no de noche. A mí cuando me ponen a oscuras ya veo la noche. Y bueno, presentamos y tenemos la suerte de que esté con nosotros Alicia Martínez Martín. Ella es secretaria general de Vivienda de la Consejería de Fomento, Articulación del Territorio y Vivienda de la Junta de Andalucía. Es arquitecta por la Escuela Técnica Superior de Arquitectura de Sevilla. Colaboró con la Dirección de Bienes Culturales de Andalucía de la Consejería de Cultura. También participó en la documentación y sistematización de la obra de rehabilitación del patrimonio histórico en Andalucía. Fue arquitecto provincial en la Diputación de Sevilla. Participó en un grupo de proyectos urbanos para la campaña de las elecciones municipales de 2003 a la alcaldía de Sevilla. Ha sido diputada autonómica por Sevilla y portavoz del grupo parlamentario del Partido Popular en materia de vivienda y ordenación del territorio. Desde 2004 a 2014 ha ocupado diversos cargos orgánicos en el Partido Popular andaluz como vicesecretaria.
Andalusia is the Secretary of Housing and Social Organisations and also European Affairs. The presentation that we are really looking forward to listening to will focus on the strategies for a public housing park in Andalusia.
Muchas gracias. Sí, bueno, yo no lo había traído en papel, pero bueno.
No, pero para que la vean.
¿Dónde está aquí los papeles?
Esta, ¿verdad?
¿Para pasar?
Con la flecha.
Vale.
Te lo voy a poner en pantalla.
Bueno, muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning to everyone. Distinguished Managing Director of AVRA, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this wonderful Congress. And we can see how the Congress is evolving. And of course, I have to congratulate the entire organising team, the speakers, for the organisation of the event. I'd also like to welcome the provincial directors and managers who are with us and the entire team that is here today. Directors of other housing agencies in Andalusia and from elsewhere. And also I'd like to welcome the director who is hosting this Congress here in Granada. Well, we have to accept that this is a very interesting subject. And the first thing we should do when we talk about housing is to, let's say, put demagogic language to one side, because for many people homes are like temples. It's where people develop their family, personal life during the time that they're on this planet. Therefore, I believe that the social commitment that we have should prompt us to ensure that we're true in everything we say. This right to housing is something that we should all together ensure is a reality for everyone. To begin, just to put us into context in Andalusia, the total housing stock comprises 4,476,000 homes, of which nearly 3,400,000 are main homes. You also have to remember that housing is used for purposes as second homes or for tourist rental. And in terms of ownership, 78.4% correspond to ownership, 10.3% to rented at market prices. Rentals below market prices correspond to 3.1% to 100,000 homes, and freely transferred homes correspond to around 8.2%. If we were to add these final two groups, that is equivalent to 11.3% of our housing stock under rental, or which are transferred free or below market rental prices. And then in the case of social housing, which we all know is housing at more accessible prices, it would obviously require a more in-depth study, but from the 1981 to 2019 historical series, there were almost 500,000 social homes in Andalusia, of which 75% are owned and 23% are rented. Avra, with this important housing park, manages 49,211 homes on a rental basis, and of those, and there's also 22,736 social homes which are in the hands of municipal councils or companies. So this gives you an idea of the current situation in Andalusia. When you invited me to participate in the first edition of this Congress 2 years ago, well, we'd only just landed. In 2019, I joined the regional government, and when we began working on housing policy, we realised that we needed to design a strategy which had to be based on two key pillars: recover the promotion of social housing or state subsidised housing, and secondly, promote the renovation and rehabilitation of homes and residential properties in urban centres. And we talked a lot about the unique nature of Andalusia, of this territory, and mention's already been made by other speakers that Andalusia is such an extensive region with so many contrasting realities that the problems regarding access to homes, to housing, is completely different if we compare metropolitan areas such as Seville, Malaga, Cadiz or Algeciras with, for example, the access to homes and housing in, let's say, mid-sized towns and cities. Therefore, it was necessary to create a housing network that would allow us to continue promoting this polynuclear model in order to endure the maintenance of this network of mid-sized towns and cities in Andalusia. And this is what we've been doing since then. This map shows how the strategy that we launched to promote social housing, and I'm going to focus on that pillar of our strategy. I'm not going to talk about rehabilitation. I'm going to focus much more on the promotion of social housing. So for this purpose, we launched the promotion of social housing, state subsidised or protected housing, as they call it here, which had been abandoned for more than 10 years. And we decided that it was important to recover that promotion of social housing for rental. And why? Well, this is a transition towards a different ownership structure, and this is important in current times where mobility and the current employment context will provide people with accessible rental and also allow them to become independent. And also because the housing park of rented social housing was highly atomised. It was in the hands of private owners. But it's actually a competence of the public authorities to offer rented social housing at accessible prices. So we got down to work and we began to develop a programme to promote the park of social housing for rental. We offered funds in the form of subsidies to developers in order to develop social housing for rental at accessible rental prices. So in contrast to other models, we don't intervene in private property, we don't intervene in the rental prices of private owners. In other words, it's the public authorities that have to respond before citizens when they are presenting these type of developments. So what we did is we would convene the developers, municipal agencies and authorities, and also private companies, as well as non-profit making organizations, and different tenders that were organised in 2019, 2020 and 21. So we're in the process of developing social housing for rental with limited rental prices. They will be capped, which will offer 2,914 social homes for rental in Andalusia. And this is the result of a strategy dedicated to the promotion of social housing, of developing approximately 2,000 homes per year. If that strategy had been developed in previous years, the number of homes that are currently being promised, and nobody's got any idea when those homes will be available, well, we would probably would have had those homes available today. So from day one back in 2019, we decided to make this a key part of our strategy. In addition, this strategy that I said we launched with two goals in mind. On one hand, to recover accessibly priced social housing for rental, and secondly, the construction of social homes in energy efficient buildings is something being reflected in these next generation funds, which were offered by the EU. After the pandemic, Europe promoted economic recovery to combat climate change and the impact of greenhouse gas emissions, revolving around two main axes: the renewal and rehabilitation of neighbourhoods, and we're doing this continuing with the work that we've done before, but also we aim to promote social housing in energy efficient buildings. We're working on this with 3,474 homes already agreed in 20 municipalities throughout Andalusia, in compliance with the characteristics that are required to be eligible for next-gen funds. So again, I've put the text is very small here, but this gives you an idea of the projects that are underway, how these type of projects are being developed in urban centres in Seville, 218 homes, which has been promoted by the Public Housing Agency, with an important contribution from the Andalusian government, and other, for example, rehabilitation projects in the historical quarter in Seville, 3 homes in this case, but which will allow us to renew, let's say, the urban fabric in the historical centre, and also projects in smaller towns, traditional buildings that have to be recovered or renewed, such as in Hornachuelos in Córdoba, and at the bottom there's another development project in Chiclana de la Frontera, which is in Cádiz. The idea being to offer 55 homes at accessible rental prices in that locality. I'd like to just announce that this programme was available to the regional government in Andalusia, but this tool had never been used. We have to remember that the regional government has competence for this, and the state plans actually establish these opportunities. This opportunity to develop social housing was always available, but it was never used by the previous government. Therefore, when we took over government here in Andalusia, gradually we began to embark on these projects, and here's some examples of some of the projects underway. I wanted to show you some examples because they're very important. Examples of different opportunities that this programme offers. For example, in Baza, in Granada, the recovery of the old town hall building, and this one here in Cádiz on the bottom left, which is being undertaken by the Municipal Housing Company, and also another example on the bottom right in Lepe in Huelva. And how are we doing all of this? Well, this is based on distributed management among public and private companies. The public developers are our main allies, the Association of Public Developers in Andalusia. And you all know that we work hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, providing each other with the necessary support. And we have to acknowledge the efforts that are made with very few technical resources available. we try to provide whatever support is necessary. And the provincial councils also have to be more active in supporting smaller towns and villages. We're providing solutions for smaller municipalities because they have other challenges to address. I don't think we can talk about an empty Andalusia, but we have to avoid regions becoming void of people, as is the case in many other parts of Spain. So here's some examples here. This is from Conil de la Frontera in Cádiz, of a project which is being developed by the public housing company in Conil. Just a couple of other examples. One development project in Osuna in Seville, which is very recent. And on the right, there's a development of 60 homes that was already been handed over to the new tenants. Again, this is social housing with the rental prices capped. Another example of one of our programs, the program for the promotion of the social housing park for rental. 2,914 homes. One of the conditions of this program is that the person has to maintain, or the rental scheme has to be maintained for 25 years, and I'm sure that once this will actually come to form part of the public housing park. So this also requires a investment of 258,000 million euros with important public subsidies. And Programme 6 to support the construction of housing in energy efficient buildings funded with next-gen funds. Well, we received a subsidy of 173 million euros for this project. And there are 3,474 homes which will be signed off with a total investment of 386 million euros. The unique characteristic of this program is that these are being developed on public land. And the rental period in the second case is for 50 years. And all of this is actually going to materialize very soon, because all of the public and private developers who are going to promote or develop and promote social housing for rental will require, let's say, so-called soft funding, which will allow them to minimize the potential risks given the uncertain climate. So I think that it's important to move forward in that line as well. Here's some more examples. Let's move on to innovation. This morning's presentation by the architect who masterly or offered the keynote speech this morning highlighted the importance of the project. For us, architectural quality is important, as well as energy, comfort and services. Here's some examples. This is an example from Dr. Marañón Street in Cádiz, and it's a good job I'm not showing you a before and after photograph. This project was undertaken in collaboration with the University of Cádiz. It is a demo project which has been supported by European funds, the aim being to study the way in which a certified building operates and works in a hot climate. And an interesting initiative has been undertaken in which an obsolete building was recovered. It's a new building, in fact, and you can see what the building looks like today, and also some photographs of other homes. There's a 10-home building from Puebla de Don Fadrique in Granada, and also you can see also some photos of the interiors of other properties in other places like Cádiz and Granada, and here's examples from San Fernando in Cádiz. So these are the maximum exponents of quality in sustainable building, with the great emphasis on prefabrication, accessibility, and also the shape and form of the rooms. And this also has allowed us to resolve a problem that has been extremely important in places where temporary workers go to work in the agricultural sector, for example in Níjar in Almería. A project for 62 homes, prefabricated homes, has been approved, And in this case, we've made sure that the development complies with maximum efficiency requirements and also codes of ethics. And also to conclude, well, before I conclude, I'd like to announce that the regional bulletin published a new announcement of a tender for the promotion and development of social housing at accessible rental prices. So the amount will be 33 million euros earmarked for this project. And we hope to receive further projects which will be eligible for subsidy. In the case of Andalusia, we're doing this through two lines which are eligible for funding. One will be for elderly people or for the disabled, with subsidies for up to 70 square metres of usable, livable space, and also another project on a co-housing basis. We know that this is often a hot topic in the news, but in this case, it is going to be the first co-living building in Andalusia, and it is a project which aims to ensure that, that people don't have to just live in 24 metres squared. They have to be homes with common areas, and in short, will offer the same quality of services available elsewhere. So, private developers have already been offering these type of services with different spaces for sport or leisure activities that can be shared by the tenants within the same building. And with that, I would like to conclude. For us, innovation is also about the transfer of knowledge and experiences, something that we're doing here at the conference. This collaboration between the university, business and administrations. And therefore, our aim is to announce a programme to call for tenders in collaboration with universities in Andalusia for research programmes which are related to the improvement of home quality. For this purposes, in two tender programmes, we've organised one with an investment of 1.7 million euros, 18 projects with 17 researchers in different categories. Social housing, residential housing, homes and architectures, architectural heritage, rehabilitation of historical centres and public spaces. Well, we could talk about each of these themes, each of these themes for a whole day. And we hope to be in a position to be able to hold the first day on our conference on research in this field. We brought together all of the researchers who participated in many of these projects, discussing the results obtained, an opportunity to transfer this knowledge and learnings and put them into practice in the developments that we undertake. As you can see, that we're moving forward and there's a lot of room for experimentation. We've done these type of initiatives on several occasions, and we've also done something similar in other call for tenders with 15 projects, 94 researchers, focusing on aspects as important as mentioned by the Vice Dean before, the project similar to the one that's being carried out on the former site of the sugar mill, with subsidies and funding from the regional government of Andalusia. The aim being to ensure the most sustainable development of such spaces, and we're always delighted to support projects of these types. And I think with that, well, I'd like to end with this slide, just to wrap up. It shows the entrance of a building, 55 homes in Chiclana de la Frontera. It's just to add a human touch. It's a mural that was produced by a local artist, and I'm sure that many of you know the Santi Petri coastline, which is located near to Chiclana de la Frontera. So the idea is for buildings to be more humane and more human-friendly. So that's the reason why we're always delighted to work with AVRA, and we're delighted to work with you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Terminamos este bloque de ponencias invitadas y ahora sí que animo a subir al atril a los siguientes ponentes. Sería la ponencia técnica, que es a cargo de la Agencia de Vivienda y Rehabilitación de Andalucía. Ponentes José Ángel García Pastor y David Recio Lebrón. Suban al atril. ¿Dónde estáis? Están por aquí. Ah, genial, genial. Bueno, aquí les tienen. ¿Quién es José Ángel? Por aquí. Y tenemos aquí a David, ¿no? Vale. Pues José Ángel García Pastor es arquitecto superior por la Escuela Técnica Superior de
Architect for the by the Architectural Faculty of Seville, and he's head of the Huelva Technical Department for the Housing and Building Rehabilitation Agency of Andalucía. He's municipal architect for La Palma del Condado region, and David Recio is head of the technical section of the Córdoba Regional Directorate of the Housing and Building Rehabilitation Agency of Andalucía, and he's also an architect. He previously worked as a technical architect as a freelance in the private sector, and he has been a municipal technical architect of the Town Hall of Montoro. And they are going to talk about the Land for Housing Swap Program Housing and Rehabilitation Agency of Andalucía, development of subsidized housing for sale, 60 houses in Córdoba and 48 in Huelva. Welcome to the floor, gentlemen.
Bueno, buenas tardes ya. Para nosotros
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be able to represent the Housing and Building Rehabilitation Agency of Andalucía, ABRA, in this second International Conference on Innovation, Sustainability and Social Housing. We are very succinctly going to talk about our pioneering promotion of housing at a reasonable price through the exchange of land for housing swap program. For those of you that don't know us, the Housing and Building Rehabilitation Agency of Andalucía is the main association or organization that the Ministry of the Development, Territorial Structure and Housing has to structure social housing and manage heritage and land. Among the things that we do is the promotion of social housing. We also develop social housing for rent, and we manage the social housing stock of the autonomous regions. We manage around 50,000 houses or dwellings for rental and 25,000 dwellings in different tenure regimes. We have a lot of experience in the management of social housing. As important examples of our management, we have economic restrictions. We have had economic restrictions that have prevented ABRA from allowing loans to real estate developers, and therefore that has curbed social housing. In 2019, there was some recovery in the real estate market, and ABRA started to use formulas that allowed it to multiply its ability to create social housing through two main working activities: boosting the sales of residential assets as well as the public and private collaboration. As my colleague David explained to you, we face the need to apply imaginative formulas for the situation of social housing and the real estate promotion. In previous years, we had managed land, and the land that had been managed was lying dormant. So on the one hand, what we wanted to do is start using those assets that we had in Avra, and also allow for real estate promoters to start constructing privately. And I would add also a third objective, which I think is fundamental, provide social housing for citizens, which is our natural aim, of course, affordable housing, housing at a reasonable price that can respond to the needs of the population. How do we organize the house for land exchange program? The first thing that we do is carry out an analysis of all of the Avra assets within our autonomous region, and we see that there is a demand for housing, where also we see that we have land that has been developed, and of course additionally and fundamentally a project that has been signed, so that we understand that we're not selling housing in bulk, but that we are creating sustainable housing that has clear guidelines as to the products that we are trying to create. So how do we do this? I'm trying to move the presentation forward, excuse me. It's stuck, is it? Okay. So what's the procedure? When we select land, we have to understand scale economy, and it has to be at least 30 dwellings for it to be important for the real estate promoters when we select plots, obviously. The mode of this type of plot has to be through tender, public tender. How do we create public tenders where Avra structures plots of land, the real estate company, the construction company? So we calculate the value of the exchange has to be less or equal of 15% of the sale value of the dwellings, premises, garages, storage, rooms, etc. And then we have to add all of the expenses of Avra, the building or construction permits, and the qualification of the land, etc. Once we have this, how do we organize it, and how do we carry out the tendering process? We use different variables, among which are environmental improvement of the building, improvement of the facilities, such as, for instance, air conditioning, domotics, heat control, automatic blinds, others which are not visible but are important, such as support to communities for their creation, so get their sets of housing stocks being built. We have housing also, 69 subsidized housing units in Granada, 33 in Úbeda, and other management actions, 50 dwellings in Málaga and 50 dwellings in Cádiz. So David is now going to talk to us about the housing that are currently being finished in Córdoba. We would like to talk to you more about the projects that we have carried out, which are really interesting and that go hand in hand with the sustainable architecture that we have been talking about, but we won't have a lot of time for that. This project, from the beginning, because it was a project that sprung from a tender of ideas This is not your traditional tender process, and also west of the area in Córdoba, near the new Corte Inglés stores, and it is the plot of land 3.1 in Córdoba. And it is in the center of this very important area, and it is surrounded by green areas. I want to very specially point to the partial plan 04, which is on the left. And this one, the Government Council on the 18th of April of this year agreed the budget to start the building and construction of 3,600 houses, out of which 1,900 approximately were social housing. So within this sector, we had to develop 54.3% of social housing, which is very good. It is an area of the city that is in full development, and we hope to start building this year. The actual real estate promotion is going to be organized in a kind of three nucleus of communication. It's going to be a 7-floor building, 60 houses in each, 57 of 3 bedrooms, and several of them with 2 bedrooms. And they, of course, comply with the public housing design guidelines. We will have 60 parking spaces and 23 storage rooms. We start all of this process started in December 2021, and we hope that it will be built by the end of 2023. How it works, the real estate promoter Alzaira, who was awarded the contract, Abra will receive out of this 10 units, 10 dwellings, 10 garage spaces, and 3 storage rooms. In this photograph, we see the opening of the ground, or the groundbreaking of this construction. Juan Carlos, you will remember this day. Here we have the regional minister, Marifran Carazo, and the mayor of Córdoba, and our general manager, Juan Carlos. These are the people in the photographs. Some more photographs of where this plot of land is. And I want to highlight the archaeological activity that we developed, because this area is very close to the archaeological site Medina Alzara. And here we see the south and west facade construction. And we have the 3 nucleus communicated, the 3 buildings that are communicated in this center. And very succinctly, I'm going to talk about the technical improvements that were proposed in this tender. The pre-installation of AC centralized air conditioning systems, and very importantly, in Córdoba, we wanted to bear in mind that it's generally hot, but it's also very cold, and one of the most important proposals that we accepted was the installation of heating through radiators for every one of the houses, the installation of the kitchens, and the installation of the kitchens themselves. On the photograph on the right-hand side, I also want to point out to the fact that we are installing pipelines for rainwater, so that they can provide water of more than of several centiliters per cubic meters. That is very important. This is the image of what the building looks like, and I want to stop a second on the price of the price of this real estate. In Córdoba, we're talking about 116,000 euros for a two-bedroom and 142,000 euros for a three-bedroom in a prime location in Córdoba. We also decided to create a pool for the common areas, and that was great. We don't have a lot of time, but I want to talk now about the Huelva housing stock. 48 dwelling units, 48 garage spaces and 48 storage rooms. We started it in July 2021 and now we're close to the end, which will be June 2023. And if you want to see a few photographs, the only plot of land that was left in Pescaderia, the neighborhood wanted to have sports facilities, but we wanted to create housing. We have had lots of problems with the underground water. We have found lots of mud, and it's been technically challenging. So now the construction is at this stage, very well finished construction. The colors of the facades remind us of the area of the sea close to Huelva, and it's been an interesting welcome. It's been welcomed in an interesting manner by the neighbors. And I definitely believe that the architecture used and the common sense used for the creation of this building and the technicians and all of the people working on the creation of this building has been wonderful. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for listening to us.
Muchísimas gracias, José Ángel, muchísimas gracias, David, y continuamos ahora con el bloque de comunicaciones científicas. Insistimos en el respeto de tiempos, es muy importante para que podamos participar todos los ponentes previstos en este congreso. Y a continuación arrancamos con la comunicación número 1. El título de la misma es Necesidades de actuaciones de vivienda protegida en Andalucía, metodología de diagnóstico de áreas prioritarias para la rehabilitación, proyecto Rehabit. Una de sus investigadoras y autora, Estrella Candelaria Cruz Mazo, Universidad de Sevilla. Junto a ella hay más autores dentro de esta comunicación.
Esta no es mi comunicación. No, esta es la de la anterior. No te preocupes. Esta no. ¿Será esta, no? Necesidad, ¿verdad? Ay, gracias. Vale, te lo pongo en pantalla completa.
Oye, aquí creo. Iba a decir buenos días.
I was going to say good morning, but it's now the afternoon, so good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate in this really interesting forum, in this extremely rich conference from so many different angles. I would like to approach this from the field of geography. I'm a geographer. I would like to ask if there's any geographer in the room. I presume there's nobody. So I'm learning so much from all of you about architecture, construction, building, etc. Thank you. I don't want to go into too much detail, but this project is encompassed within this tender, which has been mentioned previously. Subsidies for renewal at the University of Seville. I am the professor at the regional university. It was financed by the regional government of Andalusia through the official housing agency. In terms of the general objectives of the project, it is actually a project that was only awarded very recently, and I'd like to just explain the methodology that's been carried out and some of the preliminary results, which can allow us to give us or gain an insight into what we're trying to achieve. The main objectives of the project, although they are very ambitious, aims to offer tools to take decisions in the scope of Andalusian homing policy in relation to the definition and diagnosis of market areas to satisfy the demand for housing, and also to establish statistical methods which allow us to identify priority areas to undertake rehabilitation projects focusing very much on social and public housing, which are those which are clearly the ones that are lacking most and which need these projects most. The specific objectives of the projects consist of the following. The aim is to create a large geobase where everything is geolocated and mapped accordingly. And this requires the extensive compilation of statistics, indicators, the reuse of this data, processing of the data, and this is a very tedious process because we're talking about a multi-scale database addressing this from the regional, sub-regional, local and sub-local level right down to the level of the cadastre. And the aim is to focus on the city of Seville for the pilot project in order to undertake or to apply this methodology. And those are the main specific objectives: to identify market opportunities or market niches, which at the end of the day are the ones with greatest tension. This is a term which has also been incorporated in the new law. And identify the most stressed areas from the standpoint of access to housing, considering that it's in those areas where the most important shortcomings exist, particularly in terms of the market and the interaction between supply and demand for housing. And these different market areas will also present different realities, depending very much on their equipment, their level of equipment and services, the quality of accesses, and all based on different geographical, territorial factors in Andalusia, and also the socio-demographic characteristics which can be identified in the territory, the metropolization of the phenomenon, migratory processes, and how all of this is having an influence on housing demand beyond the local scale, where social housing is also required. So we can also develop social housing at a metropolitan level and not just locally. So there are different methodological approaches that we're studying to determine and identify these different market areas where we can identify greater stress in the area of supply and demand, and also for us to identify most vulnerable areas from the point of view of the housing law and residential inequality. So given all these aspects, as Sam Hinks confirmed, it's important to reconsider the different forms of housing, their usage and ownership in order to define the most vulnerable areas, the right to housing and also residential inequality, the idea being to identify the most stressed areas. And this map unfortunately is not up to date. It comes from my doctoral thesis when I wrote it. And it shows total housing actions with respect to the population. I'm not sure if you can see it clearly on the map. There's this type of mesh structure in certain areas, and this indicates the territorial area where housing policy and the different lines have been identified as priority areas for the establishment of social housing policies. And the situation is very unusual and interesting. If we look at this type of map, and we can see that the coastal areas that the law identified as priority areas, have perhaps not been as developed in political terms when revealed with such a basic indicator, the number of social housing developed with respect to the population. And, I think that we can qualify this depending on age group, the number of properties that are registered in the property register, etc. There are many opportunities for us to analyse and assess the problems that we face in our region from this perspective. If we approach this from another angle, in the case now of housing rehabilitation actions, we can be a bit more positive in our conclusions. We can see that depending on the plans that have been carried out over the years, there's been a clear improvement. The different maps reveal here. The last plan that's accompanied by the necessary cartography from 2018 to 2014, there's been an important increase with respect to that incipient period back in 1990-1991. Yes, I've only got 2 minutes. I'll go through this very quickly. We can observe that there has been a strong impact at territorial level if we analyse this from the perspective of housing in absolute terms. But if we contrast this with population, we can see that this has all been developed in more rural areas where housing prices are lower and rehabilitation needs are different. These are less stressed areas as those in areas closer to the city or town. So in these projects, the methodology is based on the synthesis and compilation or compiling of many statistical indicators. There are many variables that I can't explain here, but each of these variables contains many statistics, different scales. So different types of analyses, a multivariate study, cluster discriminant analysis was also performed in order to contrast and to confirm the different hypotheses and different indices, which will ultimately allow us to territorialize the process based on exactly what we would like to analyze and evaluate. So in this case, based on this preliminary factorial analysis, we obtain 10 indicators. I'm not sure if you can see the screen, but these can also be mapped. And I'm going to focus only on the first one because I don't have much time. We can see that the most dynamic areas in terms of income, population, and areas which are under greater stress from tourism clearly appear on the map. They appear in blue, in stronger colours, brighter colours, which require more rehabilitation, of course. And finally, and here I will conclude, all of the foregoing allows us to map the process and map different problems and identify different situations that are very striking in the Costa del Sol area, the Sierra de las Nieves area, in the area of Cádiz. There's a lot of discrepancies there, and there are problems which are associated with all of these problems, and there's more homogeneous areas. If we were to perform a dendrogram, for example, in the Guadalquivir or Pedroches areas or the Bética mountain area, well, I'd now like to move on to my final reflections, some final thoughts about the needs. Associated with housing. This project is just in the preliminary phase, and the aim, of course, will be to obtain results at local and cadastre level in the coming months. And of course, and here I will end, I'd like to stress the importance of qualitative analysis. Once we've identified the most stressed areas, we identify what's going on in those neighbourhoods and the needs for a more ecological approach and greater participation, we can obtain more qualitative statistics and variables which will enable us to further our research. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Estrella. Es que había un problema con el cronómetro.
Estrella, there was a problem with the counter, and it was actually now going to indicate 8 minutes, so Estrella didn't know this, so that's why she's gone through so quickly. There was just a problem with the counter. Please, let's respect the times allocated, because otherwise I'm going to feel terrible. Otherwise I'm going to be pushing people to finish, because I know that everything you're explaining is very interesting, but we don't have much time, so I would now like to stop and now move on to the next scientific presentation, the natural conditioning of open spaces using natural techniques. Storage during nighttime and usage during the daytime. The main researcher is Teresa Palomo Amores from the University of Seville.
Acondicionamiento natural. Sí.
Vale, bueno, yo primero disculpar porque es un proyecto bastante amplio. Durante 8 minutos voy a tener que ser muy generalista y con los 8 minutos súper claves ya voy a tener que ser pues Roberto Leal con el rojo de pasapalabra. Así que voy a ello. La introducción creo que incluso todos lo conocemos: cambio climático, aumento de temperaturas, isla de calor urbana si encima estamos en ciudades, temperatura de las superficies elevada, movimiento de aire.
In the surfaces, movement of air, and we have problems within cities, and we have to do something. We were all really happy in our houses with our AC units. However, COVID comes and we want to go out onto the streets, and we can't be in the streets. So, and if we couple this with heat and very hot cities, we have to do something. We see, therefore, the need to create innovative solutions using natural tools and ways to get rid of heat where we can find comfort. So we have the project Life in the area of Avenida de la Cruz Roja in Seville, where we have heat sinks. We have carried out the redesign of different 3 areas where we have focused on short stay redesign of areas like a bus stop, medium term or medium time stays, the redesign of a park in a square. And all of these projects are linked together by a hydraulic network. And I'm going to explain the short stay project for a bus stop. We included a radiation system where we circulated cold water through the metal structure. And I'm not going to stop here much because we're going to explain it in detail in the next presentation. So basically we will circulate the cold water through the structure and that will help people when they are waiting for the bus. So if we manage to create spaces where people for 10 minutes are saying, oh, I'm so comfortable, then we've achieved our objective. I'm going to now focus on the medium stay structure created, which is the patio of our school for the school breaks. We created a pergola based on the circulation of cool water throughout a system. We have a different shading pergola that has inclined planes which have sheets of water cooled that go through this area. It allows for the sunshine to go through and it allows for the cooling as well. And you can see here the solar control shades, and we also include semi-transparent surfaces where we circulate, as I said, the sheet of water that will cool down the surface and will allow for the children to see either the sunshine or the shades. And for the summer, this provides them with cool shelter, which is very important. With regards to the long stay structure that we created, it has more integrated systems, and for the heat and sunshine control, we needed to increase, on the one hand, the number of trees, but we need to take into consideration how long it takes for a tree to grow. So we planted them, but they're still too short. However, we didn't solve our problems. This doesn't help in our sun control, so we created an innovative solution, which is a temporary roof of small fixed structures, and we used small structures so that we could orient them, different slats, so that we could orient them, and this would allow us in hexagonal shapes to slant them towards the direction that we wanted them to. These triangles can be demounted when the trees grow enough, and they are the ones that become that fulfill the role of controlling the sunshine that seeps into this park. And this is something that can be implemented in other squares in the city to reduce the amount of sunshine. However, we also need cold air, and we need to bear in mind confined spaces. So what we did is we designed a bioclimatic bench through which we make air go through on the inferior part. It is cooled air that comes from the hydraulic system, water stored underneath, and once I've got this cold air, what I need to create is some sort of confinement so that people can feel comfortable in a smaller space. So that is why we created a fountain. We can't see it well, but this fountain is located to the southwest. So when warm air hits the area, this water can help to by evaporating and cooling down the area. As well, it can be cooled by the stored water, and this allows us to create an area with shade that is partially delimited, and it allows us to control the air that we bring in, which is cold, and we have circulation of cold air. And this allows us to create a space where people waiting for the children to come out of school or people using this park can wait comfortably. The hydraulic water network joins these three areas. We currently have 25,000 water tanks. I don't have a lot of time to explain the technicalities of it, but this hydraulic network, together with the municipal water company, we managed to create a cold water network that helps for allowing the cooling of these areas. So as conclusions, they really allowing for us to create spaces that are comfortable for people where uncomfortable situations would have happened previously is a good idea, because we increase comfort, and it would allow us to reduce the outside temperature by 10 degrees Celsius, and this would be a great achievement. So thank you very much for your attention, and this is all on my side.
Teresa se queda con nosotros porque también va a presentar una nueva ponencia con otro grupo de investigadores que la lleva a cabo, la Universidad de Sevilla. El título de la comunicación es Solución radiante en una parada de autobús de Sevilla para el acondicionamiento térmico de estancias breves.
Bueno, pues por aquí hemos reducido 8 minutos a 3, con lo cual vamos a ser súper rápido. Introducción, de nuevo, lo conocemos, cambio climático y la de calor urbana, necesitamos soluciones, de acuerdo. Un refugio climático, y dice, oye, un refugio climático es lo que estamos comentando, necesito que la gente diga, me encuentro bien. Sí, me encuentro bien, lo he conseguido, pero todo estamos hablando de estancias de media duración, de larga duración. Necesitamos puntos de corta duración, como por ejemplo las marquesinas, las paradas de autobuses. Hay muchas paradas de autobuses a lo largo de una ciudad, con lo cual si conseguimos que esas paradas de autobuses sean lugares confortables, que el ciudadano pueda estar bien, resulta que tengo muchos puntos de confort a lo largo de la ciudad. Dice, bueno, ¿cómo vamos a lograr esto? Vamos a intentarlo. De nuevo, esa marquesina con madejas de agua fría en la parte frontal y superior. Ese agua fría se enfriaría con un sistema de falling fill que está en la parte superior, es fotovoltaica, por la que desciende una lámina de agua que se enfría por la noche utilizando el potencial de enfriamiento.
Also use the cooling potential of the solar energy. Falling film or the photovoltaic energy will be used for self-consumption of the hydraulic pump and also for the lighting required at night under the canopy, which is fine, but we need to perform experiments to do so. Therefore, a prototype is developed at the University of Seville, which is exactly the same canopy, the same bus stop, with the same falling film system and the cooling water tank. Falling film was researched in the previous case, but in this case it is replaced by a water cooler with the same type of performance. So I would like to go to this side a little bit more detail. It consists of different circuits where the water circulates. Everything is designed to reduce loss of charge, to ensure that the water remains within the system during the same time. There would also be a collector with pressure valves, a return valve as well. This is developed within the university at the laboratory, and the fan coil will push hot air in order to simulate a hot day in Seville. Also a radiant or underfloor heating, heated by a heat pump in order to simulate a heat pump which would be heated by solar energy, trying to simulate similar conditions to the exterior. The idea being to launch and analyze the operation and functioning of this canopy. It can be formed by insulated steel panels and also galvanized steel perforated to ensure that all of the cooling would go to the space where people been waiting for the bus. There would be a storage tank, the fan coil, the cooler, the radiant floor. We have also the entire climate chamber. 3 different types of days are simulated using different flows with different temperatures, different impulsion temperature. The flows, again, I can't go into detail about them, but the different flows and different impulsion or propulsion temperatures, and also 3 days that are simulated. A very hot day with a high level of radiation, a day of average radiation with average temperature, and also days with temperatures below 30 degrees. And on this basis, we're able to obtain results for a day on which the temperature is, let's say, low for Seville, which is approximately 30 degrees. We can also see how the water impulsion temperature is very close, where you can't see it there. I'm not sure what's going on here. It's a bit like the discotheque here with the lights going on and off. Are they throwing me? Are they throwing me out? Oh no, it's come back. Here it is again. Okay, we can see that the surface temperature of the canopy is equivalent to impulsion temperature, or it's very close, and the idea is simply to visually show you exactly how we have a canopy which is close to 30 degrees on the left, and within 20 minutes the canopy has a propulsion temperature at 19.5%. There would be a 5th photograph which would be at 18 degrees, which means that in 4 minutes the person that's been waiting for the bus for a period of 20 minutes, or even if it's 5 minutes, would not be at 30 degrees but rather 18 degrees, and in this way wait for the bus in comfort. And if we're able to do this in every bus stop in Seville, then I'm sure we will have the opportunity to extrapolate the solution to many other cities, and I'll skip the conclusions. Thank you very much.
Interesantísima comunicación también la que acabamos de ver.
Interesting presentation that we've just heard. So we're now going to move on to the next block of presentations. Block 1, the best practices. Good afternoon.
Y después vamos a asistir a una mesa coloquio, una mesa redonda.
We'll have a round table with 5 participants. We've had the opportunity to meet some of them before. And to present the best practices cases, I'd like to introduce you to the first speaker, Jesus Coroto Briteño, who's the manager of the consortium of the city of Toledo. He's an architect and currently the manager of the municipality, and in his career he's focused fundamentally on the renovation and renewal of historical heritage, different buildings and historical sites, which we can highlight the renewal of historical homes in the historical centre in Toledo, and also in Callejón de San Pedro in the Santo Domingo Convent, and also the San Feniri Neri Chapel, and also in the Tres Aguas building, which was produced by Cristina Iglesias. The title of his presentation is The Urban Regeneration in the Historical Quarter of Toledo.
Primero vamos a presentar el caso de buenas prácticas, ¿vale? ¿O cambiamos el formato? ¿O justo...?
The formats. How do you want to do this?
Buenos días.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the Regional Government of Andalusia, the organisers and the coordinators, particularly given that it gives us the opportunity to study this type of housing, social housing, which is for everyone. I would like to put a different spin on this. A different door that's opened in World Heritage Cities, and as the manager of the consortium of the historical heritage in Toledo, I'd just very quickly like to remind you that Toledo was declared World Heritage in 1986, and since then a strategy has been put into place to create an institution, an agency that would be responsible for ensuring that the historical quarter, the old centre, is maintained, preserving its characteristics. The majority, I'm sure you know. The River Tajo surrounds the city. This physical wall, which is, well, it's a wall that's both physical and conceptual, which envelops the capital of the Visigoth kingdom. It was like the New York of Carlos V, and when people see the shield of Carlos V, that was the headquarters where part of the Spanish Empire was controlled. So Toledo is a historical city. For more than 20 years it's been managed by a city consortium with representation of the 4 administrations. There are 4 consortiums in Spain that are linked to the Ministry of Economy and Finance: Compostela, Cuenca and Toledo. Over the last 20 years or more, there's been a change in the way these have been managed. Initially the focus was on strengthening the work required on convents and large containers, and in terms of housing, there was a focus much more on concept. Whenever a heritage site whenever their home was declared a heritage site, the policy was to cover absolutely everything, because then they were fearful that the fine arts people would come and take away all of the works of art to the museum. So thanks to the conceptual approach of the consortium, what we now do is contact the technical experts of the consortium, who are almost our friends now, because they subsidise these heritage or special heritage elements. An example would be, well, these type of interventions, as you can see there on the screen, are carried out by the consortium thanks to the fact that there is mutual trust and 100% subsidisation of heritage elements and 30% of elements that are not classified as heritage items. But over the last 20 years, we've carried out projects in more than 3,000 homes and a historical quarter, which is formed by 6,000 homes. We've intervened in 3,000. There's a coordination program, and this year 141 homes were presented by owners that are registered in the local cadaster. And we actually confirmed that they are actually registered as owners in the local cadaster for the historical quarter. So the idea is to promote a living city project to ensure that everyone will have to also bear in mind tourism and citizens that live in these places, and ensure that we don't overstep the mark, which is something that we've seen happen in cities like Venice, where it's now impossible to lead a normal or real life. All that there is in cities like Venice are basically structures that actually don't reflect the way in which people lived in the city. So when we, for example, in this case, this is a baker's. The products are the same, but they're now selling double what they did before after the changing the facade. Previously it was a typically sort of tacky facade which had lost its colour due to the effect of sunlight. So the facades of these bakers and food stores has actually been improved, and now the owners actually receive more customers, and obviously we want to consolidate their position there so they don't disappear. And we try to ensure that we consolidate the presence of the local population in the historical city, and these are the type of regulations that we're trying to consolidate and also attract new population. These are two axes that are maintained. We also have to ensure that there are new families. Through this new approach, the new Bauhaus, the new European Bauhaus is an initiative that we're partners with. We believe that the interventions have to be sustainable. We know that this term is often very ambiguous, but I think that little by little we're beginning to understand this concept of the new European Bauhaus, and it has to be an enriching, sustainable, inclusive initiative. And I'd like to show you a video of tourist apartments and local citizens. It is just a short section of a report on the news in prime time, which reports that tourist apartments are occupying the whole of the centre of tourism. And TV1 says, do you want to listen to what I'm saying? And we'll show you the video and you can see for yourselves. Is there any audio?
¿Algún técnico me puede ayudar?
Technicians can help me with this.
Si no lo transmito, vamos.
Well, basically, this lady has an abandoned building next to the cathedral in Toledo, and she was about to sell the building to some investors who wanted to build some tourist apartments. She's saying that her two daughters want a building that they had inherited, which has this dome dating from the 16th century. And with the architect, they discovered that it was completely abandoned. So what we're saying is that before selling this to investors for tourist apartments, the consortium is going to give you the opportunity to make a contribution, a strategy with the consortium.
No se escucha.
I apologise, but the audio of the video is not working.
Bueno, no sé, pasamos.
Okay, I'll move on. This is an innovation project. We're collaborating with the State Attorney and also the Ministry of Economy and Finance and other institutions so that abandoned buildings in the city can actually be included in a regulated database. And we do as follows. If the building is in ruin and the people are not sure what to do with it, and all heritage cities are full of buildings that have been abandoned, buildings that have been inherited by cousins or brothers and sisters, and they don't know what to do. They're full of pigeons, and it's a big problem for all of the people.
Y entonces lo que nosotros hace y decimos a la administración a inventar, a innovar un producto.
to buildings of high heritage value. And what does this consist of? Well, the lady that was speaking on the news said that I only want 2 homes for my daughters. The rest, 4 homes, I would transfer those to the consortium so that the consortium can find 4 new families that would like to live in the centre and who would like to purchase those 4 homes. At what price? Well, since the price is not clear, the consortium preempts them and carries out a study. And in San Pedro Street, and it's spectacular if you can see it in person. It runs through the centre of the city. It's magnificent just to walk down this one-way street. It is very close to Cathedral, so we can find these type of buildings that appear in the news because they're collapsing. So we say that we're going to put forward 30% subsidy on the part of the consortium. The rest would be presented by the new families and the rest the original owners. And in this way we can organise a tender. We can recover the traditional Toledo-style patio, and this will breathe new life into the abandoned buildings. New families can own these, and they will be committed to stay there for a specific number of years as residents and also being registered in the local cadaster. So we can introduce new families, and through this project there's been tremendous social demand for it, and also families that live in Madrid who want to have a larger space, who want to be able to walk their children to school and not want to be 1.5 hours stuck in the underground in Madrid. So this is the type of thing that's being done in the historical quarter in Toledo. In this way we're able to offer people properties for ownership in these rehabilitated buildings. This building belonged to the Municipal Housing Administration back in the crisis in 2008, and we discovered that this space looked like this. It was covered in weeds and grass. There was also an abandoned crane. So we convened the local residents and we asked them what they wanted this space to be turned into. It's an asset of cultural interest. As you can see, there's also a ground level with tremendous coffered ceiling. They now want to have a space where their children can play, and there was plans for this to be turned into a hotel or offices, but the residents want homes. Well, this had been completely abandoned all of a sudden. We decided to organise an open day. We organised a special competition here, for example, for people with local talent, so that they could be represented here as well. So we organised a space so from the ruins a phoenix would rise as if from the ashes. There you can see the 13th, 14th century coffered ceiling, the Arab-style wall decorations, and also this actually becomes the neuralgic centre where local residents are able to participate. This is fundamental. Markets, the nuns that are appearing from many of these type of places also form part of the makeup of the city. And this is a space where there'll be homes, a cultural space, public areas for everyone. A strategic management space to position Toledo as a place, as a city which is consolidating its population. Thank you.
Gracias, Jesús. No sé si le parece al moderador, para ir un poco más rápido, lo que hago, leo el currículum de todos los que van a hablar, le doy paso a usted, ¿os parece? Para no hacerles levantarse, sentarse, yo creo que ahí podemos aprovechar un poco más el tiempo. ¿Os parece bien? ¿Comité científico? Sí, ¿no? Venga, voy rápido yo. Bueno, pues el siguiente caso de buenas prácticas, Alberto Bayona López, director gerente de Nasubinsa, de Navarra de Suelo y Vivienda. ¿Dónde está? Está por aquí. Título de ponencia, Navarra Social Housing, una apuesta por la vivienda pública de alquiler a través de un nuevo modelo de construcción sostenible e industrializado. Es director Alberto, gerente de Nasubinsa, director gerente, Navarra de Suelo y Vivienda, sociedad anónima desde el año 2019, donde ha desarrollado otros cargos anteriormente desde 2010. Es arquitecto por la Universidad de Navarra y cuenta con el máster en Dirección de Empresas por Foro Europeo Escuela de Negocios de Navarra. Acredita una amplísima experiencia profesional anteriormente a Nasubinsa en el ámbito público y privado. Tenemos a otro ponente que va a presentar otro caso de buenas prácticas. Estará también en la mesa redonda José María Escolástico, subdirector general de OAL Viviendas Municipales de Bilbao. Por aquí. Título de ponencia: Intervención urbana integral desde los parques públicos de la vivienda en el barrio de Oxarcoaga, en Bilbao. No sé si lo he dicho bien. Estrategias públicas para la regeneración social desde la rehabilitación. Es licenciado en Derecho, ha desarrollado su carrera profesional como abogado y consultor de recursos humanos y calidad. Desde 2004 es subdirector operativo y jurídico de OAL Viviendas Municipales de Bilbao, donde ha ejercido otras funciones previamente. Actualmente también es secretario de la Asociación Española de Gestores de Viviendas y Suelo. En el ámbito docente destaca su condición de profesor en el Máster de Dirección y Gestión Pública de Vivienda y Suelo, impartido por la Universidad Internacional Menéndez Pelayo, con sede en Granada, en el curso AVS de Gestión Social de Parque Público de Viviendas, entre otros. Autor de la Guía Práctica de Arrendamientos Urbanos
universities, and he has authored the Social Management of Public Housing Stock, and they are going to talk about the good practices cases. They're going to be part, of course, of a round table where Sergio Nazarre, Vasco Pechotto, and other speakers will participate. What I do want to do is introduce you to the moderator of this roundtable, Manuel Martínez Garrido, a degree in building engineering, technical architect by the University of Granada, and he is a public servant of Junta de Andalucía, Andalusian Regional Management. He holds several posts, and he's also an associate professor of the University of Granada Architectural Department, and he's member of the official Association of Technical Architects. I am so sorry because the interpretation has not been completely full, and the speaker on the floor has apologized for having read everything so quickly. Thank you, madam. Sorry, we couldn't hear the speaker. I wanted to provide a small introduction, and then we will present the different speakers. Our urban agenda is basically a guideline to orient urban policies from the point of view of the environment, of economy and social spaces. The urban agenda for Spain for 2019 really gathers the international agreements in accordance to the 2030 agenda, which has the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Unfortunately, we can't hear very well. And our urban Spanish agenda has 10 strategic objectives, most of them within the good practices cases that we will talk about here in this round table. The strategic objectives that go from land management to using land coherently and revitalizing of the cities, preventing climate change and reducing its impacts, improving resilience, managing sustainably resources and circular economy, or favor proximity and sustainable mobility, as well as social cohesion and equality, so that we can foster urban economy. All of these principles and objectives that are strategic, what we want from the point of view of the urban agenda, an important factor to us as well, is to guarantee access to housing. These strategic objectives highlight the need to move forward with regards to regeneration and rehabilitation of buildings, maintenance and conservation of heritage, and recycling and durability. In this round table, good practices have been presented with regards to Toledo. We are going to then hear about the experience of Navarra and Bilbao, several regions of Spain. What we want to do is also have a chat afterwards and bring the public into the conversation. And I don't want to talk really about good practices, but what I want to really focus on is about the lessons learned from Navarra. So I give you the floor. Good afternoon. Thank you very much to the organization for allowing the Navarra Land and Housing Association, Nasuvinsa, to talk to you about the Navarra social housing situation. If we have any questions, please, can we postpone them to the session for that? Navarra has 660,000 inhabitants and 250,000 houses. Sorry, 550,000 houses. And from this association, what we do is foster industrial sustainable development and housing. And we have to develop also policies, but bearing in mind the market. Our numbers have to be borne in mind because we are a market company. So in 2015, Nasuvinsa had about 900 housing stocks and 520 for rent. We had 12,000 people wanting to rent, and that's why we created Navarra Social Housing. So the government has to have will to foster these initiatives and these responses towards the need of rental housing. All of the buildings of the rent housing plan are zero emission buildings. The first phase and the second phase followed instruments and followed standards that will allow us to be nearly zero consumption buildings. We are trying to introduce new elements within the construction of buildings that not only touch on energy efficiency, but also using locally sourced materials. Navarra has 65% of forests in its land, so we are fostering the use of wood in structural elements within our buildings. So it is compulsory in our housing stock to use biomass, for instance, for the climatization of our housing stock. We have the first phase of 1,442, then 520, and then 882 phases of different housing stocks. We have aid from the European Investment Bank, and we use innovative methods to allow us financing. The second phase of 822 social housings, we have three levels, 144 housing stocks which are going to be financed by Nasuvinsa, 441 housing stocks which have the right to land, and 237 housing stocks which have kind of provided the use of the land for a specific time to other organizations or companies. For instance, we have real estate promoters which are private that have allowed us to, they build the buildings, but we rent them and manage them for 30 years, and then Nasuvinsa has the chance to buy them back from these. And this allows Nasuvinsa to have the possibility of incorporating it into the public stock, into the housing stock. Within the first phase, 520 housing stocks, 168 have already been finished and provided to the owners, and the rest 320 will be finished, and we have 32 co-housings which will be provided by 2024. In the areas where we had high demand for rental housing, this was essential. The second phase, 822 social housing, we have 144 houses that have been promoted by Nasovintza directly, and the town halls have provided the land for this. On the one hand, this allows the municipality to provide rental houses for rent, and on the other hand, Nasovintza is the investor. The rest of the real estate promotions are divided between the right of land use or providing the possibility for investors to build, and then we incorporate it into our housing stock. The first phase, so nearly 500 and something houses, have required 131 million euros, of which the European Investment Bank has provided 40 million euros. The land provided by the government of Navarra amount to 15 million euros. We have received, as public or private promoters, aid from the Navarra government, and they were 23 million euros. They have helped with the increase of prices caused by the pandemic and the Ukrainian war, and this was 12.5 million. And this really has to be understood with regards to the European Central Bank has provided us, yet they required that there be net zero buildings. So when we got the housing, so that's why we use the specific certification. The second phase relates to the 144 houses, and Nasovintza builds with their own funds because there is high risk of there's a higher risk of rent. So in this case, with more financing from the European Finance Bank, up 23.5 million. That, together with the aid from the Navarran government, really meant that Nasovintza only had to invest 5.8 million. And here we have the right to land, this collaboration between the public and the private spheres. They build and we manage, and those that housing stock will have the option to return to us. The right to land is of a maximum of 75 years, and there is several criteria which are linked to rentability and the possibility of renting. All of the houses have a software of managing where they check the levels of CO2, the temperature, humidity, so that we can avoid pathologies. We have a team that manage and help all of our tenants. This was the start. This was the sustainable consumption and their indices. And we want to move towards industrialization with the help of the industrialization center in Pamplona, the Bay. We did this with their help. This is one of the videos. Unfortunately, we don't have time. This is one of the real estate promotions that we carried out, which used wooden structure, even in the roofs, which is these two buildings. This is another building that we are going to build 39 houses of wood and concrete structure. These are 32 apartments from Las Vegas Lagaña. The first 3 floors are made of concrete and the rest are made with wood panels. And this is a very innovative project of 34 houses or flats in Navalla. And the structure is above ground level, and we want to have the help of BAI, the Building and Architecture Institute. We want to create an ecosystem that fosters, incentivates and regulates the change for a productive model towards a system that is more efficient and more sustainable. Our objectives are the ones that we see on the screen, and finally this video, which draws my presentation to our aim. This Building and Architecture Institute wants to train and have masters and degrees, create patents and create or execute real projects that put into practice what we have learned. Thank you very much.
A continuación, José María Escolástico nos va a contar, a dar a conocer su lección aprendida con el desarrollo, con la experiencia que han desarrollado en Bilbao. Cuando quiera.
Pues buenas tardes. Mi agradecimiento a Juan Carlos del Pino, presidente del ABRA, compañero y amigo, al Comité Técnico de la Universidad, a los organizadores, excelente calidad técnica, se nota, y excelente calidad humana, que también se nota. Y además, mi enhorabuena a la organización por haber invitado a Bilbao. Veo que estáis despiertos. Bueno, vamos a ello. No me voy a repetir mucho porque tienen la ponencia, la organización los tiene el PowerPoint, que tenga interés puede profundizar en ello. Me voy a centrar en trasladar ideas básicas de lo que supone un proyecto de regeneración de un barrio, el barrio de Ocharcoaga, que debe de ser algo así como lugar de lobos traducido, que es un lugar que todavía mantiene vida porque es de los pocos sitios en Bilbao donde a la una puedes pasear y oler los garbanzos, las lentejas, incluso ver a alguien que sale en bata paseando o hacer la compra, ¿no? Lo cual nos da la medida de qué características tiene el barrio. Es un barrio que tiene, cuentan que está en una ladera, cuentan que Franco en el 56 pasaba por ahí, por la carretera, porque venía de Donosti, de San Sebastián, y iba a entrar a Bilbao, y vio que en la ladera había un montón de chabolas, ¿no? Entonces ordenó derribarlo. Consecuencia de ello, en 5 años se construyeron 3.600 viviendas con 3 tipologías y que son entre 45 y 50.
Which are between 45 and 55 square meters. That gives you an idea of what the buildings are like. Ocharcoaga is a district with one of the lowest development indices in Bilbao. And by indices I refer to number of degree holders, the activity rate, and also the perception or receipt of social support. It's one of the districts which is lowest in the ranking in terms of development in Bilbao. And in terms of municipal buildings, there are 1,200 buildings that are manage rent inherited from this area. And the local regional agency that I represent is one that is a purely administrative organisation. It's not a mercantile organisation. This is very important in relation to the 2 ideas I'm going to present. It's almost as if it's like the town hall, and the rules by which it's governed are the same as those that govern the town hall. It is an agency that's 104 years old. Fortunately, over the last 104 years, there's been more than one mayor and more than one political party in power. Therefore, this sets us apart a little bit from the tendency we've seen in Vienna. But it also tells us a lot, and I want to transmit the following idea. It tells us a lot about the importance of consensus, regardless of what the idea was, regardless of the political regime. Everyone realised that Bilbao needed social housing for workers. 105 years that we've never lost sight of that idea. That consensus, that consistency has meant that Bilbao has always managed this social housing, always on a rental basis, and also with a 100% public ownership structure without any type of experiments or engineering. There's nothing here about rights or surface areas. We're very basic in Bilbao. And these 96 optional homes, you know, I'm not a political, I'm not a politician, but there seems to be a lack of strategy. The model is not going to be the construction of homes. The model is going to be the construction of residential resources that are temporary and recurrent and which are vital for the population, and that is the future. And our customers are also very loyal. Nobody wants to leave public housing. Therefore, the turnover rate is very low. And I'm not joking. I'm just saying, just to put this into context, but also to try to shorten my presentation a little bit. And we really follow this policy right through. There isn't a transfer of capital from the city council, so every year we basically make money. And the profit that's made, that's between €1 million and €1.5 million, well, what do we use it for? We use it for new developments, for saving, etc. So I want to transmit this idea that this management model, which is supported by the public authorities, is possible. The data prove it. And I'm not saying this out of pride for Bilbao, but to encourage other town and city councils and local entities and societies or companies to manage this type of public housing based on efficiency and effectiveness. I'm not going to talk to you about the indebtedness level, but we do participate in 664 communities of owners. And so we participate in this huge number of communities of owners that are governed by the Condominium Act, which is the most democratic legislation which is in place. The law governing communities of owners regulates administrators, presidents and management committees, etc. And that is the gateway that's allowed us to become involved in this rehabilitation program in Orachacuagua. It's the gateway that's allowed us to move into this district in order to implement our rehabilitation plan, which is called Orain Ochar. And I'm just going to talk about our strategic focus. The main stakeholder in this renewal project, 3,600 homes in a deteriorated district, because we have 1,200 homes that we manage on a rental basis. This is a true strategic challenge, and it's promoted by public administration. Therefore, it's the administration that's responsible for setting the targets, for controlling coordination, for assessing the results, and for implementing the actions. The public administration. We have not outsourced this responsibility. The responsibility is assumed entirely by the public administration. Public action aims at the citizens as a whole. So when we had the opportunity of launching this project, we didn't think of a 10% of the population, but 90%. There was a psychiatrist who said that 10% of the population consumes 90% of common resources. And in order to simplify, I would say that it's 90% of the population that has to benefit from this initiative. This public action is structural. It was 2018 when it was launched, it's 2023 now, and it's achieved continuity. And this continuity is guaranteed, independent of any certain thresholds that may occur, but also dependent on the results of the elections. And the idea is for it to offer value added to existing public services. It's not just based on the application of the principle of efficiency and effectiveness. The aim is to ensure that through every initiative we want to ensure that each action is 100% profitable. We've got to manage a heritage, and we have to ensure that it's profitable entirely. Otherwise, it's not going to be worthwhile undertaking this type of initiatives. This rehabilitation has to be based on general objectives within the district. It has to have a multiplier effect. Additionally, it has to be coordinated with the public strategy, which will control who is responsible for rehabilitation. We have to try to ensure that the adjudication of these type of projects is done correctly, that these spaces are maintained, so that if photovoltaic panels are installed, the whole neighbourhood will benefit from this. So we see this as a strategic access. The aim is to recover spaces since the because when the public administration distances itself from these spaces, it loses them. And as we move closer to this space that we've lost, I'm referring to physical spaces, squares, streets, doorways. Whenever we visit these again and we approach these through renewal programs, we can recover coexistence and also ensure that people are able to live in adequate housing. It's very simple. You can recover spaces through the recovery of a shopping centre to ensure that third sector multi-use services are able to be provided. And also incorporating a kindergarten, which will be a benchmark example of the incorporation of R&D&I in collaboration with the university. We've also managed to alter from a town planning perspective, and I can't believe that town planners have prohibited terraces from being built on consolidated buildings. That's a miracle. One of the other miracles, in my opinion, is that we've managed to get unemployed people to use this space, a space which, as I said before, was going to be used for R&D&I and the regeneration and rehabilitation in collaboration with the University of the Basque Country, to make this a versatile multi-use space, an example of energy efficiency in order to cover the entire housing stock and ensure that we can incorporate digital solutions and energy savings for all residents and all tenants. The core idea is to take to the Ocharwaja neighbourhood human capital, ensure that the neighbourhood is known and valued and destigmatised. Our strategy actually begins the other way around. It's not a question of focusing on, or let's say centering our efforts on foci of conflict and stress, but rather working from the outside in, attracting human capital. And it all costs around 12-13 million euros. I have to say that it was initiated with 50% financing by the Basque government. We are now with next generation funds. We'll see if we can obtain more funds, but we will find a home for all of these people. And very, very finally, and here I will conclude, I'd like to talk a little bit about the public-private collaboration model. How have we managed to access the communities of owners to ensure that these initial, we're now at 160 homes that have been completed, 6 blocks, advancing at a tremendous pace. We have had some problems, which I will have to mention, but how have we done this? Well, if I said that the public sector has a legitimate right, what about the tenant, and explain to them what has to be regenerated or rehabilitated? And the tenant may say, well, I've managed to get by for 20 years without this. That's the problem here. Well, we've managed to do this thanks to 2 things. Firstly, legitimising the public services we made. The communities of owners, or we provided the communities of owners with the instruments necessary to sign contracts. So the administration of projects and works have been published in the official regional gazette. Transparency, responsibility and coexistence or coherence. Secondly, we've made the technical experts available to the community of owners in order to provide them with guidance to speed up the execution of the works and ensure that everything is completed accordingly. And the third factor, which is crucial, and here I would perhaps like to conclude before moving on to my final point, is the architect and surveyor's commitment who's working in municipal housing. Without the commitment of the personnel, of staff, there is nothing that we can do. You have to spend afternoons in the afternoon speaking with local residents and listening to the complaints. Without that, we're not going to get anywhere. Without that, we're not going to spend any next-gen funds. And finally, I would like to thank, because otherwise I won't have my minute of glory, to Professor Nazare and Vasco, because they have been mind readers. Well, actually, we've signed an agreement. An agreement's been signed between the federations responsible for management of public housing in Italy, Portugal and Spain. It was signed 1 month ago in Valencia, precisely to ensure that we can consolidate or ensure that we have our own identity. And I'm very respectful of any decisions that are taken in-house in Europe and elsewhere. But the idea is to set an agenda of our own objectives. We cannot have Vienna, Oslo or Copenhagen setting the path for these cities in the south of Europe. And with that, there's nothing more for me to add. Thank you very much.
Creo que andamos regular.
I think that we're not doing very well for time, which seems to be par for the course. But perhaps what we can do is hand the floor to the other two members of the panel who've participated in this round table. And following on from that comment, Professor Vasco Peixoto, I would like to ask him, based on our analysis of comfort, that sense of well-being that we all feel, that sense of comfort that we all enjoy in a building. In your presentation, when you referred to comfort, you referred to the need to reduce energy consumption and improve energy efficiency. But comfort, well, there's more to it than that. When we refer to comfort, we can talk about biometric or light-related or acoustic comfort, audio comfort, sonorous comfort, but there's also other aspects that we consider when considering comfort in building, ergonomics of building, ergonomics of construction. And experience has shown us that our homes are not just places we live. Our homes are also being transformed into our workplace, and increasingly so. So I think we should take steps forward in that direction. How do you see things, Professor?
Bueno, quería decirle, le he pedido antes que a ver si se podía expresar en portuñol, ¿no? Que me hiciera un poco, pero me ha dicho que no, que va a hacer
in Portuñol, and he's going to make a huge effort to speak in Spanish. Comfort is something that's very important. We have ahead of us decarbonization by 2050. Energy has to be worked on, and the quality of air is crucial. And we have made changes up until now that have not been the most positive, because users can't use ventilation in a flexible way. Thus, the quality of air inside buildings is going to be degraded. Humidity is a very real problem within housing, especially in social housing, and it is absolutely necessary to question and think about intelligent ventilation methods so that we can use variables so that users can control natural ventilation. The other problem that I think is important regarding comfort is acoustic comfort, noise pollution. It is important to find acoustic comfort strategies for the inside of houses. In several countries in Europe, there is legislation that is clear regarding noise pollution. And to conclude, a very important aspect to me, we have two problems: buildings, new housing, and rehabilitation of buildings and renovation. New buildings can respond to characteristics and performance indicators that are necessary with regards to hydrothermic principles, illumination, lighting, and ventilation. But in the existing housing stock, it is a higher challenge, and there's a risk, because we need to transform buildings to be able to accommodate the energy needs in a very complex environment. And it's something very complex, really, is how we use and how we maintain and how we keep what we build, because the durability of what we build today is a lot lower than the traditional construction and the durability of traditional buildings. So the quality of air, the quality of light and air, and the quality of energy is a problem that we have to face. And the other one is the durability of automatic, complex, intelligent systems that are very difficult to maintain. The next question is going to be for Sergio Nassar. After your presentation, I wanted to ask where the right to housing is, the right afforded us by the Constitution. So I wanted to ask, where are we headed with the right to access to housing in comparison to living in inhumane conditions? So where are we headed with our legal frameworks with regards to creating houses or housing which is not accessible and that is not appropriate for human beings? On the one hand, I would like to thank all of the different speakers and the lessons learned that you have shared. And I want to highlight the personal implication of all of the professionals that participate in the different projects. You know, those people that go in the evenings to talk to the neighbors. There's no success model without working hard. When we in different chairs, we talk to different political parties. We need to talk to everyone, and so we have to really work hard to talk to neighbors and to neighborhoods. I must also add that perhaps Navarra and Basque Country are really a bit more advanced. They've have a little bit of time on us, because they have housing stock for rent that is higher, and they have a lot of funds to support their prices, and therefore they can rent housing for €300. Having said that, the right to housing is not part of any constitution of Europe as a fundamental right. And in no constitution by no constitution are we afforded the right to go to a judge and say, I have the right to housing, and they would give you one. No, this is not like the right to life. However, housing is not like this. In France, however, the government of Chirac, the right wing, in 2007 approved the first law outside of the constitution that granted the subjective right to housing. The Basque Country granted it in 2016. So the right to request and require a house. France only actually fulfills 47% of its commitments to provide housing to people, and they can't fulfill all of this commitment, and so they self-inflict they have to pay for not having been able to provide housing for those that needed it. And I don't know whether they have money left to build social housing, but the fact that we gather on paper social housing rights does not mean that they can provide you one. I believe that your social housing for rent before was €250, and now it's 300. But people, what they want is a house. They don't want to rent it. With regards to accessibility of people with disabilities, I think it's a great challenge, an absolutely humongous challenge. We are now focusing, most of our speakers are focusing on energy, next generation fund, sustainability. A few years ago, I went to the European Commission to talk about the next generation funds. And in that conference, we presented a report, and they told me that we had the most pessimistic report, because what we said was that people couldn't pay for their associations of neighbours, and they couldn't pay for the fees that they required for the building that they lived in. I'm in agreement with Escolástico that Portugal, Spain, Italy have the highest number of houses owned, and we are energy efficient in a sense. So really, rehabilitation and renovation is essential for the ever-aging society and population. And sometimes when Brussels sends groups of experts to make sure that things are following the course that they have dictated, we get a slap in the wrist. So it's very important to understand sustainability in that light as well. So when someone from Brussels comes and analyzes what we do, sometimes it doesn't match up. So I think the challenge that you have all presented also goes hand in hand with the fact that there's an aging population, accessibility for old people, and that's all I will say. Thank you very much. We are going to draw this panel to an end with the lessons learned that have been presented from Toledo, Navarra, Bilbao. I want to draw this session to a close, reflecting upon the things that we have talked about. We need to move towards a culture of building renovation and rehabilitation, and also maintaining what we have and preserving heritage. Recycling and durability are essential. Thank you very much.